I think the balance is about spending time with people you care about. That's obviously important. Doing work that is meaningful with people you care about. So the relationships that I have with our team and our staff and our managers, and keeping those as positive as possible, and doing work that is exciting, that where we're able to, create great guest relationships, great staff relationships. That's like a big part of, the ethos of the company, is like investing in those relationships. That gives me a lot of energy. And then the creative process, bringing something to life that is unique, that, has never been done before in a city or a neighborhood. So those are the things that to me give me the most energy. And I'm not saying that, that's, new age BS basically about like, I'm not going to do anything that like takes away energy. That's not what it's about, because there are tons of activities that you do that suck energy. It's just about managing that balance so that you're not completely burned out at the end of every day on everything. You're not able to give your best to those activities anymore, and therefore they end up declining, and then you're really not happy with the position you're in life.
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, CEO and co-founder of Castellucci's Hospitality Group, Federico Castellucci. My man Fred, are you feeling unstoppable today?
Yes, sir.
Dude, I'm psyched to be here. Second time we've had you on the show. Your episode 486. This is going to be episode 1175. 7 years have gone by. More than twice the amount of episodes have gone by. And when I was listening to that episode on my way here yesterday to kind of like refresh my mind and to pick up where we left off, I instantly knew why I wanted to get you back on the show, man. Like it was such a great episode. Your story is so inspiring. If you have not caught that episode, head over to restaurantunstoppable.com, search for 486, or just go on iTunes or Spotify, listen to that episode, get caught up, or just continue listening if you don't want to take my advice. But it was a great episode.
Thank you.
I can't wait to kind of dive into where you are today and what's happened since you were last on the show. But let's get that motivational, inspirational, ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Success quote or mantra?
Yeah, man.
I think it's just about every day waking up, trying to do a little bit better than you did the day before.
I love it.
It's like the micro steps.
Yeah, like 1% better every day. It's not a competition against you and anybody else but yourself.
That's right.
Yeah, man. Great way to get this thing started. And okay, paint the picture of where you are today. In 2018, you had 6 unique concepts. How many total locations in 2018?
I think it was like 5 or 6, something like that.
Yeah, you didn't have any duplicates at that point.
No, we did not.
Today you're at
maybe
9?
4. I don't know.
I think you're at 6.
We're at 7 now, with 8, 9, and 10 in the works, and then there's been some, shuffling since then as well. So we sold off one of the concepts as well, and so
yeah, I saw that. Mm-hmm. So 5 concepts. Before it was 6 concepts. Mm-hmm. You're 2 more locations than the last time I spoke to you. Now mm-hmm. I think. So we have a lot to unpackage. I am curious, like one thing I'm trying to get better into, and the feedback I'm getting from my listeners is we're trying to get deeper into like the numbers and like benchmarks. Are you willing to talk about numbers?
Yeah, sure.
So give me an idea, like how, like you have 5 unique concepts. Like which one of those concepts in terms of like revenue and profitability is like the best performing?
Well, I think, it really depends. People ask me about, which, restaurant do you like the best, and it's kind of like children,
right.
But just like kids, one might be more successful than the others. And for that, I mean, it has been, from a top line revenue perspective, Iberian Pig has always been kind of one of our strongest concepts, but Cooks and Soldiers is right there with it. And we're we have the other restaurants, which restaurants oftentimes top line's important, but bottom line is equally, if not more important. And so some of our smaller concepts have, really good profitability because of either the business model is a unique business model, or in some instances, really great rent deals. And, like my earlier concepts that I bootstrapped with basically no outside investor capital as well as no bank capital. So really scraping by to get a restaurant open can have really great impact on the profitability of that business if it hits.
Yeah, and Federico,
which is a big if.
Yeah, it's always rolling the dice.
Scraping by it's harder to make a bootstrapped restaurant successful these days.
Yeah, and I'm happy you pointed out. I think it's getting harder and harder. Cost of rent's going up, cost of food, cost of goods is going up, labor is going up, and the consumer behavior seems to be pretty rigid. It doesn't want to change.
Well, I also think one of the big challenges is that the price of entry has gone up. Like traditionally restaurant food businesses were this entrepreneurial opportunity for people to get in on the American dream at a relatively low basis or price.
Yep.
And that has become more and more challenging because, and I think to a certain extent, this has always been the case in the restaurant business that the more glitz and glam that you invest in has paid off. But I think it's become even more so nowadays than it was even in the past. I think that the price of just building out a restaurant and doing it with a level of finish that consumers are going to be excited about has just gotten wildly expensive.
Yeah, and to offer some context, I think it was the early 2000s is when you graduated college,
Mm-hmm.
you came back home or to Atlanta, you joined your father. At that point, I think from the first episode, you said that you were paying the banks $30,000 a month just to cover the overdrafts.
Yeah, well, it was on an annual basis, but we were balancing so many checks that the overdraft fees alone were like the price of a manager's salary back then.
Yeah.
So we were just really in a difficult position.
And the things you did to bootstrap you were off at Cornell, you learned a lot. It was like, again, I really encourage you guys to go back to episode 486. It was such a great episode, but it's from where you started to where you are today. It's truly inspiring, man. So from the top, right, in terms of concepts, you have the 5 concepts. Just list those concepts for me real quick.
Yeah, so we have Iberian Pig, of which there are 3 locations.
That's the oldest?
That's the 2009 original one that I opened right out of college, about 2 years out of college after I took over the Sugo in Johns Creek. So there are 3 locations of that restaurant, which is Decatur, Buckhead, and then now Nashville. And we are about to open in another market. We recently signed a lease in Charlotte, so we're
Awesome.
excited about that. And then there's Sugo, which was the original one, which there's multiple locations back then, but now there's just the one. We either sold or there's a moment we were doing some franchising, but we ultimately consolidated into the one location in Johns Creek, which is the one that I ran from 2007 to 2009 as GM right out of college. So that was my first welcome to the real world experience, which was extremely challenging to say the least. And then we also have Double Zero, which is our pasta pizza restaurant, Southern Italian, Neapolitan pizza, which is great. And that's in Emory Village. Then we have Cooks and Soldiers.
What year did that open?
That opened in 2011.
Okay.
And then we have Cooks and Soldiers, the restaurant that we're in currently right now, which is our Basque restaurant. It's 2 times James Beard nominated Basque cuisine. So here in West Midtown, which has been open now. We're in our 11th year here.
Congratulations.
So pretty amazing.
2014.
That we've had the longevity here with that concept. And our most recent concept is Mujo, which is a omakase sushi restaurant here in West Midtown as well.
When did that open?
And that opened in 2022, the very beginning of 2022.
Is it Mujo that's Michelin?
Yes, and Mujo was awarded a Michelin star in the 23 inaugural Michelin Guide, and then again in 2024.
That's awesome. Okay, so, and of those concepts, you said the Iberian Pig and what was the next most? Cooks and Soldiers?
Cooks and Soldiers, the one we're in.
I would have suspected it would have been Double Zero.
Yeah, I mean, Double Zero, it's a lower check average, so we're in like the $40, whereas the other concepts were in 55 to 60 with Iberian Pig and 70 to 75 with Cooks and Soldiers.
Are you comfortable sharing % profit? Is that something you can get into? I want to ask total revenue.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way we operate the restaurants is in the like high single digits.
Okay.
But also there's the corporate overhead piece too. So we build that corporate overhead into our P&Ls.
Okay.
So we build in like a high single digits as well, corporate overhead that then kind of flows up to the corporate team basically that runs the corporate structure of the restaurant. So, if it's a single restaurant, we're in that, 15+% if we were just running one restaurant. But because we have the corporate overhead now as well, it kind of pushes that profitability lower.
When did that corporate overhead start flowing in?
I mean, I think it depends on the way you grow the company. But for us, like after we got to 2 restaurants and then the third one, we realized there was some general oversight that we needed.
Yeah.
And then it really started around a lot of in the early days, the first corporate hire that we made was marketing.
Yeah.
Because that person was overseeing like our digital footprint everywhere, menu printings, and just kind of how we were showcasing ourselves in every way. And it was just a lot of work, and it was work that the GMs couldn't do. And it was also work that was kind of tricky to outsource in such small quantities. So it was really a role where we could build a full-time role just around that stuff that we were kind of outsourcing in little quantities or the GMs were picking up. And then the next after that was accounting, because the GMs were in charge of the P&L, which was really challenging because most GMs are not accountants. So they don't know how to like do journal entries and all of that stuff. And so that was really the next thing to kick in.
Yeah. And one of the biggest lessons I've learned, the 2 first things that you outsource, unless you are a CPA or a lawyer, is legal and accounting.
Yeah.
Like you just don't just outsource it, because the amount of trouble you can get into not knowing what you're doing, you might not be able to recover.
Yeah.
So, and I think, thank you for getting vulnerable and getting transparent. And the reason why I'm asking this question, and I usually give my guests a heads up that I ask, and I had distractions getting started today, but the reason why is because I think it's really important that we get open and honest and transparent and vulnerable. And I think that the reality is full service, high touch restaurants, to have the staff, to have the cost of goods. If you're doing between like 7 and 10%, if you're in that ballpark, you're doing better than most people. It's not until you really start to get into the QSR operations where you start seeing people doing 20%, or unless you're doing some kind of crazy volume with like event space or something like that. I think it's just really important that we get realistic and transparent. I think there's a lot of ego and flexing in the industry, and it's just a lot of bullshit, man.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I mean, I hear operators and landlords floating numbers all the time about top line numbers that people are doing, and it's just not accurate. Like, I mean, people are exaggerating anywhere between like $1 million and $3 million on top of whatever is actual reality, and that just isn't real, And so I think it is important that other restaurants. Yeah, it does. It really does. And I know because we've done the whole gamut of like not successful at all the way up to very successful, and it's challenging. I think for the operators out there, depending on the style of business, it's really hard to make money in the 1 to 2 million range. That's like a really tough place, especially in full service. You can do it a little bit in fast casual potentially, where the labor model and the food cost is really low.
Yeah.
But as soon as you're in full service, we've never been able to figure out how to make money under 2 million.
Yeah.
And at 3 we can be successful and profitable. At 4, life gets a lot better. At 5, things are really good. Anything over 5 is amazing. And I think that's just for Atlanta, because every market's different.
Well, that's one thing I was curious. I was hoping that would come out of today's conversation. You've been in Atlanta since the early 2000s working here, and the market has grown a lot since then. So from your perspective, like what are the new challenges for you? Like, is it just market saturation or?
Well, I think Atlanta is a unique market because I was recently talking to a restaurateur out of New York City, and they're a very well-known high volume operator with very glitzy concepts, and they kind of have this opposite challenge, which is now they want to grow outside of New York, but their businesses are all in that like $7 to $12 million a year revenue, and they can't figure out how to make the business model work on less than that. And so I think it's interesting, like each operator, you kind of figure out how to make a successful business model with what you got,
right,
and then try to build on that. But what makes Atlanta unique is that it, in some ways, it's kind of a challenging market, but it's also a lot like a lot of other places. And so, it's one of those places, like if you can make it here, there's a lot of other places you can make it. But if you can make it in New York or LA, there's not a lot of other places like that.
Right.
And that I think is part of the challenge about being successful in a really big market like that, is that it's hard to translate that success into other markets. Whereas Atlanta, it's one of those places where if you're successful here, there's a lot of other places you can be successful.
What's unique about Atlanta that makes it a good test market?
I think it's kind of what makes it hard. It's a big city, but it's sprawling.
Yeah.
And so you can't just open a restaurant in a neighborhood and expect it to cover much more than that neighborhood.
Yeah, people don't cross the bridge, is the expression, but I don't think there's many bridges around here, but like they don't leave the neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have to build a strong business based on that neighborhood. And so because it's such a sprawling city, people aren't just going to drive 30 to 45 minutes for dinner. Right.
I think there's something else that I've seen too. I think back in 2018, you had 6 concepts. Now you dialed it back. You're focusing on scaling Iberian Pig.
No, I mean, not just that. I mean, because I think that the job of any person that is in my seat is you're trying to, and this goes really for not just a restaurant company, but any company, I think, is the job as the leader is to decide how much resources, whether that's time, energy, money, to allocate towards primarily like 2 main activities of growth, which is exploration or innovation. That's like new concepts, new ideas, or exploitation, not in the negative concept, but like in the way in which we're going to do more of things that are successful already for us. And so you have to be able to do both activities in the right quantities for your company and for the amount of capital that you have. And so if you're just doing exploitation, eventually concepts have their run, and then they're no longer quite as successful anymore. And so if all you're doing is duplicating something, that's risky in its own endeavor.
Putting all your eggs in the one basket.
Yeah.
When you say exploitation, what do you mean?
I mean, taking an existing concept that's already working and just running with it.
Okay.
And so, but then exploration, which is a little bit more creative and fun.
Multi-unit,
but it's also
concept.
Extremely risky. Every time you do a new concept, it's like a totally new startup.
Right.
It's a totally new company. It's something that you're questioning every single decision that you're making. Is it right for this one particular concept? And so that's a very risky thing. And you're putting a bunch of capital towards that new thing. And it is very risky ultimately. And so you can't just do exploration, because ultimately you'll run out of money, because the stuff that you do is not going to succeed quite at the rate that you need to keep the company going and successful. So you have to do some of the exploitation, which is duplicating things that are already working. And so, but like I said, if that's all you do, then ultimately that thing stops working. And then what do you have?
Yeah.
You have a company that's going to fail.
Right. And I think one of the things I love so much about the restaurant industry is that there's so many skill sets that a restaurant needs to be successful. So whether it be back of house talent, front of house talent, back office talent, I think one of those talents, there's 2 that are coming to mind. One is just concept creation development, like really having an eye for design, an idea of what the market wants, and like being on trend, and like the creative process of just creating like that thing that just catches traction and hits. Some people just have a skill for it, and they love going out and building concepts, and they surround themselves with operators, right?
Well, so to your point there, that is ultimately what you talked about, is all the different skill sets. That's what keeps me coming back. That's what I love about this industry and what I do, is that since the very first day I started doing it, it challenged me in every possible way.
Which
and that is just in all of those areas that you said. You have to be great at operations, front of house, back of house, accounting, HR, marketing. Like, you have to be able to do all these things in one little business that most companies have people in every single department doing all of those things. And so it challenges your left brain and your right brain equally, and it pushes those areas to the limit. And so from the very first day that I started doing this, that was what excited me about it, and that's what brought me back for more. And then as we've grown, it continues to challenge me in different ways. And so every 2 or 3 years, I feel like I have a completely new job.
Got to break the mold.
Yeah. I have a completely new job every few years based on what we're doing and how we're growing. And so, all of those things are what gets me excited. And I get just as excited about going and opening a new market with an existing concept like we did with Iberian Pig in Nashville as I do creating something from scratch that's like brand new, Like I get that. As long as there's some element of challenge, that's what I'm looking for.
What up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's be profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master of restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
So one of those things that you mentioned, that was like the other like vertical within the industry that is like on the rise. Like, you can't just be good at one thing. You or people around you have to be good at these things. The marketing side is getting so important. It's interesting. I think that I'm starting to see where in the past it used to be, okay, either you're front of house or you're back of house, and either like the general manager, front of house, that's the partnership. There's like usually 2 or 1 owner, right? Mm-hmm. And the partnership is in front of house and back of house. Today, you're seeing people who are marketing experts who are becoming or getting equity in business because it's that important. And like, it's almost like if you want to scale, like it's not enough just to offer jobs anymore. You have to like almost provide equity in the business. Have you seen that too, or is it just my imagination?
No, I mean, I think it depends on the skill set, and it depends on where you're at in your growth. I think when you're first starting out, a lot of people are looking to bring in that talent, and talented people aren't going to take a huge risk on you and a promise unless there's more to it than that in the very beginning. But once you have scaled to a certain size company, people aren't taking much of a risk anymore. They're not worried about whether or not they're going to get paid, or whether or not this business is going to be able to support their salary or is going to succeed in the next 3 to 5 years. So I think with any business, and this is any startup, not just restaurants, the opportunity for equity is in the very beginning, when there is nothing there. It is, everyone's taking a risk. Some people are taking a risk with their capital, and other people are taking a risk with their time and their creativity. But the old saying is there's really only 2 equity creation activities. There's capital, like money in the business, and that obviously is an equity creation piece. And then there's the talent, and that talent in the beginning is where the real 100%, kind of creation is, and that's before that business becomes alive. Right. Because when the business is alive and going, now there is a go forward cash flow and revenues and things like that.
Yeah, it's easier to attract people to yourself with a 6-figure, like, if you can offer a 6-figure annual income, right?
Yeah.
But early on,
and that's why you have a co-founder, and like a traditional startup is like, you and one other person, or you're taking two parts of the business and you're trying to create something out of nothing.
Right.
You
But
know?
I think there's no argument there's more restaurants today than ever before.
No doubt.
And I think that's why you're starting to see a lot more people willing to offer equity, because they know that they can't do it without the people. You need the people. And if somebody else, like, either you provide them the opportunity or they're going to go find it somewhere else, right? So the other thought that I kind of brought to the surface earlier today was talking about this idea of finding one concept that is profitable, that's scalable, and people are putting energy. You're seeing, I think, more and more people trying to to change the game. I think there was a lot of, and maybe if you have a different perspective, feel free to correct me or share your perspective. But I think people are starting to become smarter operators and realizing that it's much easier to scale one concept than it is to manage 10 different concepts, right? So you're seeing, I think, smarter operators say, let's focus on scaling this cash cow. So, and getting that like going, and then we can focus on our like dream, where people used to chase their dream out of the gates, and then they would run out of money or they'd be undercapitalized and they just couldn't get it going. So now that they have like that security in one concept or multiple concepts, then it's like, okay, let's start shooting for stars.
Yeah,
i.e. Michelin stars.
You know, I disagree a little bit, because every time I've done something new, whether it's the first concept or the last concept, the times I've been successful doing it is when I'm pursuing an idea that I'm really passionate about, something that I really want to bring to life. And that authenticity of the drive is ultimately, I think, what brings something unique and cool to life.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to product market fit your way into a successful concept, typically there's so many other people out there that have tried to do that already, and it's disingenuous.
Yeah.
And to me, you're not following something that you're really excited about. You're following what you think is going to lead to a successful business outcome in dollars and cents. And in my experience, because I've made that mistake, it doesn't end well.
Yeah.
You know, like I'll give you an example.
Which concept
like,
was the mistake?
In Krog Street Market, where we opened Bar Mercado, there was an opportunity for a restaurant that had gone out of business there, and you look at the market and the success that's being done in the market and the foot traffic and everything else, and you think, wow, this is an amazing location. I need to jump on this location. It's already built out as a restaurant, so I can jump in here and for $75,000 take over the keys and then fix it up and have myself a successful, profitable business. And I just need to figure out an idea that would work great in this space. And so you kind of are trying to reverse engineer a successful concept in a location that already existed as a restaurant. And to me, there were so many points of failure there where I missed. And it was just, I got overzealous about what I thought was going to be a great space, and then try to create something that wasn't as genuine to what I was excited and passionate about. And
Yeah.
then, so when it's been successful, I've had a great idea or a concept, or at least a beginning of an idea that I really wanted to bring to life, and something that I wanted to see happen in our city, and something that I felt was a meaningful addition to the dining scene in Atlanta specifically, or in Nashville with Iberian Pig, when we brought Iberian Pig to Nashville. And so that's always what I'm looking for, is like, how can we meaningfully contribute to this neighborhood, to this city, with something that I'm passionate about that doesn't exist already in droves.
Yeah.
And so I think that is really the answer. The idea of taking a concept and scaling it, like, maybe I could have duplicated Iberian Pig more quickly, but we opened the first one in 2009 and then didn't open Buckhead until 2019. Buckhead was the most successful restaurant we had ever opened. We'd opened, Cooks and Soldiers, Double Zero, and then Bar Mercado and Recess and Krog Street Market. Recess still open and successful. That's the one I mentioned earlier about where we sold it off because, it was fast casual, and I found that fast casual wasn't something I was super passionate about, and I was really good at the full service and not so good at the fast casual. So we brought in an operator who runs it way better and more profitably than we ever did.
With that what was the concept? Like
Recess.
What were
healthy fast casual.
Healthy fast casual.
Yeah.
Like bowls, salads, stuff like that.
Yeah, bowls, salads.
What was it about the QSR that you didn't like?
Well, for me, it's two totally different skill sets. So with fast casual and QSR, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to really tightly manage your costs, and you're trying to make a very quick, efficient meal that is consistent in quality. And in full service, what we're trying to do is we're trying to tap into people's emotional response to a meal and a setting and an occasion. And so the skill set that it takes to create that experience from a hospitality and food environment perspective is a totally different skill set. It's not based on managing your cost down to the penny. It's not based on that same efficiency and speed and consistency. It's more of an emotional response that we're trying to gain from our guests and elicit from them during that time.
Got it.
And so that was really, a little bit of a sidebar there. But, the 10 years that we spent between the first location and the second location, tried a lot of things, did a lot of exploration, a lot of innovation. Most of it was successful, thankfully, and most of those restaurants are still alive and well. But there is something to be said for not taking a concept that is immediately successful and duplicating it right away and trying to scale it, because you have a successful brand. The easiest way to kill a successful brand is by over expansion,
right? Because
it's just like a luxury product. Like if all of a sudden you could get a Birkin bag anywhere, anytime, then Hermes is not the same brand.
Right. No, I agree with you. So I think, what I said earlier is you're seeing people realize that, you can, if you find something that has decent margins and is something that has legs and you can scale, you're seeing people realize that you can probably increase your total revenue that way better and faster, and then use that money to then go after like the Michelin stars, like the more high touch passion projects that are super high cost of goods and labor, but lower margins. Right. So I agree that it has to be kind of like a Venn diagram of like, that's like, it's like quantum physics, man. It's like 4-dimensional. It's not like left or right or black and white. It's like all over the place. Like it's like this balance. I think that you do need a balance of actually having like to your point, a passion. You have to have that interest, that drive. You need that too. 100%. I agree. It's a complicated system.
It is complicated
sure.
because people, if you were to ask a customer, why is it that you go to this place or that place? They would probably give you a number of reasons, but in reality, what they're not saying is there's a highly complex emotional response that's going on in their mind that is leading them to patronize your business. And no one really knows what that is. Like you can ask people, but they're not going to fully tell you. And so you are trying to create something that is going to resonate with as many people as possible that ultimately creates a successful business. And meanwhile, while you're trying to do that, which is your top line, you're trying to make sure that all of the other constructs of the business, including the size and the rent and all of those other like hard details of the business, are aligned such that once those people do come in, that you actually have a chance at making money.
Yeah. Let's go back to 2018. You said in 2019 you scaled to the second Cooks and Soldiers, and that was
Iberian.
Iberian. Thank you very much. The second Iberian, and that was your most successful unit to date. Mm-hmm. Take us there. Like, what was going on? Is this the first time you duplicated? Well, you had multiple concepts.
This was the first time that we duplicated.
But with your dad.
Yeah, so we had multiple Sugo locations, but they were either franchise agreements that ultimately failed, and then we had and so I took over one of the franchises that had failed back in 2007, and then we had the original that we opened in 2003, and those were the only two. And then ultimately we sold in 2013 the original Sugo and went just down to the one location. So we took a shot at expanding one brand, and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And so we were back to that one. And so I had done a lot of that new concept stuff, but then, 2019, I felt like we were ready to duplicate something that was tried and true.
Yeah, what I'm excited about is you got to experience what it was like to take a concept and scale it. And from our previous conversation, you kind of shared that you fell on your face a little bit. Mm-hmm. There's things you didn't really do well in hindsight. So taking all that experience, moving forward with the Iberian Pig and scaling that, like what were the things that you did right this time?
For sure. So I think with any new business, there are certain things that you want to try out for the first time. And then there are certain things that you want to keep the same that work, And so I think that for us, we knew the concept, the menu worked. We wanted to see, could we do it in a different neighborhood? And could we do it with new construction? So like, is it just the magic of the Decatur Square with the cool old buildings and the old storefront and the rafters and the brick and like just the sex appeal of that cool, amazing, historic old square? Is that what makes that restaurant successful? Or is it what we do inside that box that makes it successful? And so what we're really testing out is, can we go to a new neighborhood, totally different? Buckhead and Decatur are like opposite ends of the spectrum. It's like one couldn't be more blue, one couldn't be more red. It's like totally different neighborhoods. So could we take it to a different neighborhood, and could we take it and do a new construction version of it? And what would that look like? And how would we translate that into a new space? So obviously there are some big challenges that come along with doing that. And so we took a lot of time and effort into, selecting the location and the design and putting it all together and figuring out how we were going to pay for it, bank loans, all that stuff. And so when it all finally came together, and it was just a massive hit. And so we knew that we had something on our hands again. But that was May 2019. And then not even a year later, our biggest success, now we're like, oh no, we're going to lose it all. So,
I mean, I hate talking about the pandemic because it's like, we all know, it's like we all felt the hurt. It was hard. So leading up to that, I mean, do you guys do all of your own design work, or do you outsource that?
We outsource our interiors and architecture.
Okay. And this was a good experience, this design that you did. Are you willing to talk about who you worked with?
Of course, yeah. Elizabeth Ingram did the design for Iberian Pig, Buckhead, and Sarah Hawker was the architect, and they totally crushed it.
So what are the specifics about this? We just recently had Stephanie Robson. Do you know Stephanie Robson? Yeah, had her. I love this woman. She's amazing. We've collaborated now on 3 workshops. We did a business planning workshop. We did a back of house layout and design workshop, and we just wrapped up our front of house design.
She was one of my teachers.
Yeah, she's amazing, and she's an incredible collaborator of mine. Somebody I just promote the hell out of. She got into all this design stuff. So in terms of design, you put a lot of time and energy and resources into getting this right. So what is right about it? Can you get into the specifics?
Yeah, I mean, I think that with design specifically, we just keep on learning and keep on getting better with each successive opening. And I think there are like 10,000 little details that go into every single opening. And I can't tell you exactly which ones are the make or break ones, but we try to make all of the decisions well.
Success by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, exactly. And so you hope that you make enough of them right that you're successful. But what I can say about that particular opening is that I chose Elizabeth Ingram for a reason, because she really had this way of creating a history within a space. And so one of the things that she did that was really unique with all of her openings is that she creates a story around the business as if it had been there for 100 years. And then she goes and like finds artifacts and things that kind of tell that story in the space. So you have a sense of history, even though there's a space that's brand new. And so she does that with the materials and all the little details in the space that ultimately I think led to translating what was something very successful in the existing location into something that's even better in the second one.
Yeah. In terms of the first location and the second location, were there design, like in terms of like efficiency and maybe a bigger footprint, a bigger kitchen, things are like, if we could just have these changes in the new location, did you build the new location from scratch?
We did. We built the new one from scratch.
Reverse engineer what you want.
Yeah, and we learned a lot of that with Cooks and Soldiers, because Cooks and Soldiers was the first restaurant that was built from scratch as well. So everything I had done before that was second generation space, because that's all I could afford. And so we kind of scraped by and bootstrapped it. Like the original Iberian Pig was a previous restaurant, and we talked about it on the first episode, but it was 2009. The recession had hit. Our contractor that we had hired to do the job took my $25,000 deposit, did some demo work, and skipped town. Oof. And so I ended up becoming the general contractor, hiring all the subs, and opening the restaurant for what was our entire budget was $100,000 to start. So I had 75 to work from there. So took 75 and stretched it to what ultimately was almost 300 to get the restaurant open through creative barter agreements and pay overtime and things like that. And so, we scraped by to get that restaurant open, and then it was an instant success, and that really kind of fueled a lot of the growth moving forward. But I realized that after the second opening with 00 that I got in way over my head trying to GC another project, which shocker, I'm not an amazing general contractor. So ultimately decided, hey, with this new concept with Cooks and Soldiers, I wanted to bring to life, it was time to go out and get a loan and do new construction and sign a new construction deal. And that was where we really went through and kind of built everything from scratch and all those details that you talked about. And so I think that in any business, we want to create, like in the dining room, and in the kitchen, we want to create like a really nice flow, like in and out. So the pathways are pretty consistent. So you kind of get this muscle memory over time of like, this is the way you work in this business. And it kind of just becomes habitual almost. And so the movements of the staff are consistent and not erratic. And so that's something that we look to build into every single location that we do.
Okay.
And then we try to make sure that there are no bad tables. So, the types of tables where the host brings you over there and you're like, is there another table? Can we get a better table?
Right.
Like we try to avoid having those moments in the restaurant. And so there's a lot of, we want to anchor tables to either a wall or to something.
No floating deuces. Does that ring a bell?
No floating deuces.
Do you remember that from Stephanie Robson?
Yeah. I don't remember that, but I probably should. I didn't pay enough attention in her class. But yeah, so we want to try to create as many desirable tables as possible. And over the years, we've gotten better and better at eliminating those undesirable tables when we design new restaurants.
Right. If you guys are listening to this and you have not checked out part 2 of the 3-part series on front of house design and layout, Stephanie goes an hour into seating. Especially, she just talks about an hour into like what to consider with seating. It's a really great job. It was a great collaboration. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, I'll have to read. I'll have to get into that one.
Yeah. So I'm looking at your website with Iberian Pig right now. I think I just quickly went through and counted between 24 and 26 menu items. Does that sound about right?
Somewhere in that range, yeah.
You have charcuterie, quesos,
cheese,
tapas, and
raciones.
So
we're kind of in the 28 to 32 range typically.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that's another trend you're seeing is people realizing just like focus on doing a few things really well. Cost of training goes down, cost of goods go down, waste goes down. It affects your bottom line so many different ways. There's that. When I was asking about the design and basically building this out from scratch, were there things in terms of like operational efficiencies that you built in intentionally, and like what kind of effect? I mean, this is the best performing location you've had. So like, how were you intentional about making it your best performing in terms of like logistics and operations?
Yeah, I think something that we toyed around with that initially was working really well was like service bar, pulling it away from the bar. Now we've kind of gone back and forth on that a little bit. So in some instances, depending on the volume, it makes sense to have it integrated into the bar, but over a certain volume, it makes sense to have it satellite where the bartender is just focused on making drinks for the dining room. So I do believe like one of the most important things is like how quickly you can get the guest experience off on a positive foot. And so
how fast does that drink come?
Well, yeah, it's a little bit layered. So it's like from the greet at the host stand to your table to within 60 seconds, a greet from your server to water to getting that drink order in and getting that first food on the table, like the fastest possible way that we can do that, such that people kind of just like relax and like they're like, oh, we're good. This place is great. They're on top of it. Like we know we're going to have a great experience. If that first bite of food, that first sip of that drink is great, you're like, we've got this person.
Yeah.
Like, and that to me is critical. And that's what that specific concept, like Iberian Pig does really well, is like, if you get some of the best cured meats and cheeses in front of somebody within a very short period of time, like Jamón Ibérico and some of the great products of Spain, with an amazing glass of wine from Spain that costs a lot less than similar quality wines around the world, that to me is the experience we want people to have as quickly as possible. I think that's what makes that concept great. And that's what we try to build into really all of the businesses.
Yeah. I had a question. I lost it. Come back to me. I'll just ask you something else. I'm sure it'll come back to me. So as you continue to scale this, what are the most of one concept you've ever had? I'm curious. Prior to this, was it 3 or 4?
I think we had 3 or 4 Sugos back in the day with franchises, but we never owned more than one.
Okay.
So this is definitely the most restaurants we've ever owned.
Going into your 4th Iberian Pig in Nashville. Yeah. What are the personal struggles for you in terms of scaling one location?
I think that right now the challenge is always, how do you balance your family with the demands of the business and all of the other demands on your time, really. And so I have 4 kids under 8 or 8 and under, which is obviously almost as challenging, if not more challenging than operating restaurants. And so that is, it's a big part of my thought process around growth as to how will this growth impact my time and the amount of time that I'm able to spend with my kids while they're young. And so really about crafting this life for myself where it generates energy and it doesn't take away. And that's really tricky to pull off. So I'm constantly trying to manage these activities, whether that's spending time with my kids, whether that's spending time in the restaurants, whether that's going to search for new locations in different markets or creating new concepts. How well are these activities supporting energy growth and how are they taking away?
So when you're your most energized, what does the balance look like?
I think the balance is about spending time with people you care about. That's obviously important. Doing work that is meaningful with people you care about. So the relationships that I have with our team and our staff and our managers and keeping those as positive as possible and doing work that is exciting, that where we're able to, create great guest relationships, great staff relationships. That's like a big part of, the ethos of the company is like investing in those relationships. That gives me a lot of energy. And then the creative process, bringing something to life that is unique, that, has never been done before in a city or a neighborhood. So those are the things that to me give me the most energy. And I'm not saying that, that's, new age BS basically about like, I'm not going to do anything that like takes away energy. That's not what it's about, because there are tons of activities that you do that suck energy. It's just about managing that balance so that you're not completely burned out at the end of every day on everything. You're not able to give your best to those activities anymore, and therefore they end up declining, and then you're really not happy with the position you're in life.
I think and I've spoken about this in the past, but you're bringing it to the surface. I think the most important thing or the most common value that restaurateurs and entrepreneurs have in common is freedom. Right? They all want freedom. And when I say freedom, I think the first thing that people think of is like probably like freedom of time and freedom of money. But I think the true freedom that we're all in pursuit of is freedom of purpose and freedom of relationships. And I think when you have freedom of purpose and you have freedom of relationships, meaning you get to choose what you like, your why. You get to choose the thing that you show up every day for, and you get to choose who you do it with. When you have those freedoms, then time kind of like flies by. You're living intentionally with the people, the most important thing, which is other people. And then it gives you the endurance, I think, to achieve the freedom of money, because you can like do it better and you can outwork other people because you have this.
But that's not true just to entrepreneurs. I think you can have that freedom
I don't think it's
of
limited
purpose
to entrepreneurs, but I think
and freedom of relationships within roles in companies, if they're designed properly. And I do think that a lot of times people get into the job of a restaurateur or an entrepreneur because they're looking for that freedom, and then they're confronted with the harsh reality that like they just lost all their freedom that they had. And so you have to really desire something different if you're getting into it because you want freedom or compensation or any of these other things. Like that is not why you should open a restaurant.
Well,
That's not why you should become an entrepreneur. I really believe that like entrepreneurs are people that they cannot do anything else.
Yeah.
Like they're like, I'm unemployable, really. Like
I say that all the time.
I'm definitely unemployable. And there's nothing else I could do. But I think that you have to have that drive and that purpose to like really bring something to life. And then when you have brought it to life, to see it through existence. And there has to be something that keeps you coming back for more, because you can't just get into it for the freedom that you'll ultimately have. Because for me, it took me, over a decade to achieve any freedom whatsoever.
Well, I'm back to on this list of this hierarchy of freedom. It's purpose, relationships, time, money. I think when you say the word freedom, the first thing that goes to mind for most people is like, I want freedom of time. But the reality is you have no free time.
That's the last one you get to.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah,
and you might not have any money when you're doing like 5% profit margins in the beginning, or like whatever, or less. Maybe you're losing money. Maybe you're operating in the red. But if you have freedom of purpose, to your point, first, and you prioritize freedom of purpose, because like to your point, we're unemployable. We don't care about the money and that stuff. Like we want to, we're curious, we're driven, we're passionate. And if you have the people, meaning you're surrounding yourself with people you love and that you want to see become successful with you. And when you have the right people and you have the right purpose, you can deal with anyhow, and I think we're saying the right thing, but maybe there was a disconnect.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just think that there's an opportunity to create that for yourself without going through the pain of being an entrepreneur or trying to open a restaurant.
It's not for everybody.
Exactly.
You gotta have a high threshold for risk and pain.
And pain. Yeah. You have to have a high threshold for pain.
For sure.
That's the only way you're gonna get through it.
But I think true freedom is choosing to do the hard thing and realizing that I fucking chose this. I wanted this. I have it. I'm doing the thing I always wanted. And you can flip a switch and say like, I can choose to be like stressed and angry and resentful, or I can choose to recognize this is exactly the thing that I wanted. And then in doing the hardest things in like, what is it? Like iron sharpens iron, like you will become a better version of yourself.
Totally. And I think people know the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think that it's when you know the right thing to do and it's hard and you don't want to do it and you do it anyway. Like that's ultimately the definition of success, because I think everybody understands most times what the right thing to do is in most situations.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that when that right thing is the thing that you don't want to do and you do it anyway, that's really the difference. I think it goes in every way. I think back to some of the earliest days, when I was took over the first restaurant and I'm GMing and I'm the only manager. So I've got no chef and no front of house manager. I'm open to close every day. We're open 6 days a week and we're losing money. We're doing like Mondays and Tuesdays, 30 covers or less. There's, certain nights where we did less than 10 covers, and you go into that shift at 5:00 and you have battled all day to get the restaurant open, and your bank account is lower than it was the day before, and you have to put a smile on your face and go out there and run the shift, and you have to connect with guests and turn it around, and then you're closing the night at the end of the night, and you know that you did 10 covers, and the next day you're going to bounce checks and you've got less money in your account than you did when you started that 16-hour day that you just finished. It's like, can you get up and do it again? And that is really the difference maker. And if you got into it because you thought there would be all this time and money and purpose and freedom and relationships, you're not making it through that. You're just not.
So are you familiar with Jordan Peterson? The name Jordan? Do you I'm not hugely religion. The verdict's still out for me, but he has this docu-series about building how the West was built. And he goes to Jerusalem and Rome and what was the other? Athens, Greece. He talks about these three pillars, these three cultures that really were coming together around this time, 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. And how those cultures coming together and kind of slingshotting off each other. But he references in that docu-series how the West was built. He talks about when they were in Jerusalem, they talk about Jesus and how Jesus really the symbolism of Jesus was that he chose to bear the load. He chose the messaging in his taking that load and dying for other people's freedom is it's like in doing like the most hard possible thing, like carrying this cross down these like it's symbolic for like choosing to do the hardest thing, because and if it's your choice, it's this weird like psychology of like, it is the most like, you have no personal time or freedom, but you have the choice to make that decision to do the hard thing. And if you choose to embrace that in a weird way, it's almost like the most freeing thing. And I think that for some reason that resonated with me. Am I hitting with you or not?
Right now? No, like, for sure. I mean, I think that's just, at the end of the day, you know the answer to the question. Basically, it's like, you should do it, but you don't want to.
Right. Freedom isn't sitting on your couch and saying like, I just want to watch TV, or I want to eat horrible things. And like, we think that that's freedom. Like,
people are just generally, I would say, not good at assessing the consequences, the second and third order consequences of decisions. And so it's like the first order consequence of a decision is like, I am sitting on my couch and I want to eat ice cream because it tastes good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but the second order is that you're not moving your body, and then ultimately you're not going to be, physically able to do the activities that you want to do. And then the third order consequence is that, hey, someday you're probably going to live less years. You know what I mean? So it's like all those decisions that we're making, there's multiple consequence levels to every decision we're making. And so assessing what those are, and people just generally have challenge with kind of getting to that second and third level. But ultimately they still know, people know that what those second and third levels are.
There's another book out there that I recently, that kind of supported that docu-series, and it's called The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. Have you heard of that one? It's really fascinating, but the argument there is that all we know is the most cushy time ever to be alive. And like, our perspective of like life is almost to the point where like it's like at a detriment, like how good we have it is a detriment to our psychological state.
Well, that's like, the famous Viktor Frankl book, Man's Search of Meaning.
Yeah.
And kind of the concept around humans are the most adaptable species. And so it's like, it's a blessing and a curse.
Right.
So we're extremely adaptable to comfortable situations and the most luxury. Like, we're basically living today better than anyone else in the history. Any king from 100 years ago.
Yeah,
basically.
It's wild. Running water is like,
but likewise, we're
150
equally
years,
as adaptable to the worst possible situations in the world. And there are people in the world that are living, worse than people did, 300 years ago.
Right.
So I think that, it's a blessing and a curse.
Right, for sure. Okay, let's get back to restaurants. So, the pandemic happens. During the pandemic, did you have any casualties during the pandemic?
So we had a different response to the pandemic, and I think this goes back to our, ultimately kind of the way we built the company, and we had been through some really challenging times in the beginning, getting it off the ground. And so we had reached this success point where we were really successful and stable, and the businesses were going great, and we didn't have a lot of debt, and we had no investors. And so I was able to sit there day one of the pandemic, and when the closures started happening, and say to myself, let's zoom out for a second here, instead of jumping in and making the same decision that everybody else is making very quickly here.
Were you an S Corp?
What's that?
Were you an S Corp?
Yes.
Okay, so you were able to go on unemployment yourself?
Oh, no.
No, wait.
No. So what we did was we immediately, none of the restaurants that were running takeout, we immediately transitioned to takeout and delivery, ran our own delivery services before Uber Eats was up and running, and we never closed the restaurants a single day. Wow. So we basically took that approach that we were going to fight our way through it, and we didn't lay off our employees, and we actually struggled to keep enough employees to do the businesses that we were doing, because a lot of people didn't feel comfortable coming into work, and we were okay with that decision. And so we ran lean staffs basically with the people that were willing to come in for over 2 years. But that was the pivotal moment, which was, we're going to figure out a way through this. And I knew from earlier days that, you just get up and try again. Like, shutting down the businesses was just never really an option for me, because I knew the cost was going to be tremendous, because you have the staff, then you got to rehire everybody, retrain them. You've got all the costs. When you turn off a restaurant, the costs just keep rolling.
Right.
Like, they don't just like, oh, I decide today is the last day, and then all of our costs go away. No, they keep rolling. Like,
how many of your
a
concepts,
lot of them,
your current concepts in the 7 locations, do you own any of the buildings?
No.
Okay, you rent.
Yeah,
okay.
we have deals with landlords, but so that was the decision that we made, and ultimately made the decision unilaterally because we didn't have investors and people that told us that, hey, you can't do that. You need to protect our investment. You need to close today. And so I think that's one of the beauties of having a family-owned business, of people like my brother and sister and I, that people know that we are in the operations, we've done it, and if we were going to come in and shut the business down, it would have been us having to tell our people that, hey, we're shutting it down. And so I didn't want to do that.
All of your locations were open for at least a year leading into the pandemic. So you were able to get the PPP and like all that stuff.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And that was fortunate and great when it happened, obviously, but we didn't know that for over a month and a half when we were operating and trying to survive. And so when that happened, we were like, oh, great. Obviously, the economic devastation that would have happened if it were not for that would have been beyond tremendous.
And you had accountants, so they were probably plugged in and like were quick to get on that, I would imagine.
Totally.
The other benefit, there were people that weren't able to get it because they just didn't know how to get the paperwork done.
Terrible.
It's sad. So when did things start to recover for you in terms of being like on all cylinders again?
I mean, the impact has been just like really tremendous. We're 5 years later now, and we're still in certain ways not fully back to equilibrium. You take a massive shock to any system, you throw a big rock in a pond, and just the ripple effects are going to go on for a long time. And so we're still feeling little ripple effects, but I think who knows? I mean, I don't even know if, I think the general consensus is probably right now a little bit negative on restaurant sales and where we're headed and just rising costs and everything else like that. And so I think we're still in this cycle of uncertainty a little bit.
Yeah, it's a collective uncertainty. And I think one of the things I hope to achieve with this podcast is to get that vulnerability, to get that transparency, to share benchmarks so we know, oh my God, we're down 2% from this time last year. Well, the whole industry is down. We're in this together. So like relative, like you're doing great. Like it's a collective down that we're feeling.
What up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master on restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
I think what happened is you had a lot of money that came into the system, and then we had this big rebound from the pandemic, and really in 2022, because we opened Mujo in the beginning of 2022, and that was the Omicron variant came out and crushed business again right in the holiday season, and everybody was in masks again, and everybody was getting sick, and customers weren't coming in, and so it wasn't really until midway through 2022 and then 2023 that we saw this big rebound. So we had the big rebound year, and then we had 24, which came off of that big rebound year, but was still pretty strong.
Yeah, a lot of people had money from the pandemic because they're getting unemployment and they're also getting checks.
Exactly.
Business,
and then you had business owners that had gotten PPP loans, and then we're now using those PPP loans to open new restaurants that they shouldn't be opening.
Right.
And so opening these new businesses that didn't really need to be open, and so now we're seeing a lot of those businesses fail.
Right, this is the impending recession we're about.
Yeah, exactly. So people opened a bunch of businesses that they shouldn't have, and now those are starting to go out of business. And so I think we're hopeful in the next year to kind of get back to more of an equilibrium. And I think that we'll see.
Yeah. In terms of like, I think to your point, when the pandemic happened, you dropped the big rock in the pond, the ripples, and like in any of that rippling, did you shake things loose? Did you get rid of old ways? Did you evolve your platforms, your systems, your processes to be better?
Oh, absolutely.
Like
I think we were constantly reevaluating what we're doing. And I think that we've gotten a lot better in a lot of areas and just eliminated excess waste. And we've also reevaluated how we do work. I think that doing work virtually is become much more a part of our business. Like prior to the pandemic, these tools existed. You could do virtual meetings, but a restaurant manager or a chef would never get on their laptop or computer or phone and like dial into a meeting, and it just would never happen. We did everything in person. And so now we have this tool that allows us to save a lot of time. And then we also evaluated whether or not like our accounting team needed to be in person. Like, did they need to be going into an office every day? Could they be doing that work from home? Like, are there certain roles that require more of that or less of that? And so I think it's been really good because it's allowed us to run a little bit leaner.
Better balance.
Yeah, exactly. And maximize the minutes that we have and the time that we have.
How is that quantified though? Can you put any like data to that? Like, is your labor costs down, or did you get?
We eliminated our corporate office.
That's
I can
huge.
tell you that. I mean, we don't have a corporate office that people show up to every day, and we do meetings out of the restaurants, and we have people that work remotely, certain types of jobs that are remote, and then when we need them in person, we do them at the restaurants. And so we've been able to kind of just really run a little bit of a leaner organization in that regard.
When you get together, how often do you get together to have that FaceTime? That like instead of
It depends on the role. So HR people are more FaceTime than accounting people, and kind of everything in between.
Right. I mean, it's weird. Like, I think you don't see a lot of this in the restaurant industry because it's so like in person, like you're serving people in person. But in like the greater corporate world, I think there is something to be said about being shoulder to shoulder with the people that you're working with every day. I think that there's a level of camaraderie and energy that's necessary, like literal energy that we all radiate. And I think they're just starting to scratch the surface on the significance of like we know about this stuff. Like Eastern culture has been talking about this shit forever, like auras and energy, and like now like Western culture and science is starting to be like, oh shit, they might have been onto something that they knew about for like 10,000 years, like.
Yeah. And I think for every business, you have to decide what that is. I think for restaurants, because each one of our businesses is so in person, like 95% of our employees are just in person. Like there is no virtual element other than like meetings during the day that we'll take. Will allow people to be not in person for those meetings, but it's allowed us to be a little bit more efficient with our time. And then also with like certain support roles where we're just not, it doesn't have to happen in an office. Now, I think if your whole business is in an office, then yeah, everybody needs to be going there with some regularity in order to achieve the culture and the, creativity and the camaraderie, all those things that you mentioned. I think it is critical that there is at least some component of that. But restaurants is always going to be that way. Like it can never be completely virtual.
So in 2022, you opened in Mujo. How does this project stack up compared to other projects in the past for you?
So very unique. Also a big risk. Initially, it started out as a pop-up, and so
what is Mujo for people who aren't?
So Mujo is an omakase sushi restaurant based in Atlanta. I had a friend who's a sushi chef in New York City who I had been trying to convince to come to Atlanta and to do a pop-up with us. So we were planning on the pop-up, and we had scheduled for April 2020.
Okay.
So
when you're talking pop-up, is there a strategy behind that?
No, I just wanted to bring it to Atlanta.
Why?
because we didn't have any like sushi at that level, like omakase style sushi, one bite at a time, that intimacy that you get at a sushi counter, like the ones in Tokyo and now New York and other places. It's seen this, tremendous growth in that specific concept. But to me, it's such like a incredible personal way of fine dining where you get that interaction with the chef and the staff, and each bite is made for you and you eat it with your hands and they make it with their hands. It's like
That's
this
cool.
very intimate experience. And so I wanted to bring a little slice of that to Atlanta and do a pop-up and see if there was even demand for it,
Okay.
because nothing like that exists. Of course, there were sushi restaurants that had omakase counters built within their existing operation where they have like a bunch of tables and a la carte menu. But in order to do this style of cuisine, like edamame style sushi, you have to commit to doing only that, and that exclusively is how you achieve that quality level for each guest, because the ephemerality of it is such that you cannot be making all of this orders for a la carte menus for everybody in the dining room and still do this at a world-class level. It's not possible to do.
So you have the sushi bar, and then you also have a private room. How many total seats are there?
So there's 15 in the sushi bar, and then the private room has 6, but the private room is also a chef's counter. Okay. So you get a private chef for the evening.
So there's 6 seats, but it's a counter.
It is a counter.
So it's like your shoulder to shoulder.
Same
there's
exact
one.
setup.
There's the chef
Exactly.
that's serving you.
Yes.
Right. And you said 15 in the sushi bar.
Yep.
And that's more like, is that more of a traditional like fixed menu?
Yeah. The omakase is a fixed menu, prefix menu that we do in all spaces, and so.
Well, is it more a la carte? It's not a la carte anyway.
No. There's no a la carte, and that was my point. Is that the only way to do this at a world class level is to commit to doing only that and the one menu each night.
So all in is 21 seats.
Yes.
And so I'm assuming that in terms of in terms of profitability and margins, where does this guy fall?
So it's one of those things where it's kind of like an airline. So an airline is really only profitable when all the seats are full.
Right.
Right. And so as soon as you start seeing empty seats, it declines
also,
pretty significantly.
I got to make a little side note on this. The reason why the airlines are failing so bad right now is because of the way that people shop for seats. Have you ever flown anywhere? How do you see your seats? It's always the cheapest one or at the very top. And then people are like, why is the service shit? And it's because you're literally buying the lowest cost option. That's how the algorithm anyway. It's not a good way for any industry to function, but it's just like I was a previous commercial pilot, so you hit a vein with me when you said that. Sorry, keep going.
No, and so I think with Mujo specifically, we opened this restaurant. We started as a pop-up, and then once I saw the demand for the pop-up was tremendous, the first night we ran it out of Cooks and Soldiers, and there was like literally a instant sellout and like a line to get it, and
out of this location
and out of this kitchen, and the quality level was tremendous. And so I really knew at that moment that we had something. And so very shortly thereafter, in July of 2020, which was still probably the worst part of the pandemic, which was when people realized, oh, this thing isn't going to be a 6-week
people started
deal.
to accept the fact
that this is going to be really bad. So I signed a lease for the space. And then it took forever to open it. It was one of the most challenging openings we've ever had because, you have all the supply chain issues, and then everybody's all, in their feelings about COVID and the Great Resignation, and we had lost, some key people, and just culturally it was a challenge integrating, this ultra fine dining kind of approach, and we were running it out of this kitchen as well. And so, it was just a super challenging to get that business open. And then, we finally opened it in the beginning of 2022, right when Omicron hit. And so I was like, man, and it had gone crazy over budget. I was like, this is clearly the worst idea I've ever had. It was the most challenging opening, trying to do it in the pandemic. And then it's also the most expensive restaurant in Atlanta. And it's also making
literally the most expensive restaurant in Atlanta?
Wow.
And
and you're making each bite by hand, and and then people are eating it by hand. And so it's like the opposite of what was, what people were expecting during the pandemic in those days. And so it just, I thought for sure it was going to be a disaster. And then I'm working friends and family, and we send out the press releases, and all the news outlets locally picked it up, and the reservations just start flooding in. And within 24 hours, we were booked 3 months in advance. And it was just like amazing.
Wow. Congratulations, man.
And we kept that going. And now we're almost, we're over 3 years old, and the restaurant is still booked. And it's one of those things where the it's a great business, but it's also very small. And so in order to make a small business work,
it has to be the most expensive restaurant.
It has to be expensive. And in order to be profitable, it has to be booked. And like if there are empty seats, like it erodes really quickly.
Are you still sold out? Like, has there been nights where you like, or are you like months sold, like booked?
We typically sell out like within a day. It was, and when we first opened, it was like 7 minutes. We'd sell out two months of reservations. And now it doesn't book out all the reservations within like 24 hours, but most of them, and then it'll kind of trickle.
So you're like 95% capacity on most nights. Yeah. So I mean, get into like the struggles associated with that. There's things coming into my mind, but I don't want to make any assumptions. So 15 seats, I'm assuming does the private sell out first, or does the sushi bar sell out
Sushi bar sells out first, because, you have to get like 5 or 6 people to make the private room work.
Okay.
So it's a group dining experience.
Can you get into like the prime costs associated with that?
It just depends. I think that in this fine dining model, we go heavy on labor because we want people to get this amazing experience.
They're paying the most for a meal, and
so,
they got to get a great experience.
Exactly. And so we have 2 somms for 15 seats plus the private room, and a manager and servers and back servers. And so the staff to guest ratio is super high in order to achieve that experience. But it does, have that level of hospitality that is really challenging to find. And so our labor costs are higher. And then we try to keep our food costs in line with basically a successful restaurant, right around 30%, because that is, kind of universally what we see is like you can make money if you're in that range, and so we basically price the menu to reflect that. Right.
And so what are you making up? So if you're at 30% with your cost of goods, then you're at least 40% labor?
No, we try to be in the 30 to 35% on labor as well. I think that all of our businesses are kind of like, it's funny how it works. They all kind of trend towards being the same kind of stack ultimately. And it can, what really kind of impacts it is ultimately, it's not really the labor. It's the sales and how the rest of the costs spread out on those sales, because we're basically hitting that 28 to 30% food cost, and that 24% beverage. We're like a blended 26 to 28% on all your cost of goods sold, and then 30% labor, and then the rest.
So you're underneath the prime cost.
So target. That's our goal.
So we want
every business like at 58% prime cost is really where we know we can make good money, and have the corporate overhead and the team that oversees all the restaurants. That's really where the ideal kind of alchemy is.
So with a 15-seat restaurant, is your rent high, or is that on the lower side?
No, of course it's going to be very low, because I knew immediately that was going to be a key portion of it. And so it's only 1,500 square feet. So it's super small. And I made sure that we didn't have a percentage rent component, because I knew the sales would be very high for the square footage. But in order to make money, you have to have low rent.
Right. So when you're reverse engineering a concept like this, are you just starting with, okay, we know we have to be between 55 and 60% with our prime costs. Like that's you're aiming for, like, you're at 58%.
I would say a lot of people reach out to me about opening restaurants and trying to like get some advice and understand like what they should be doing. And I think my primary piece of advice on the financial side, the structural front, is you need to have a really good idea of how many people theoretically, well, in reality, how many people you're going to be able to serve on a given night. So you need to know what that number is. How many people are likely to come through your doors on a Friday or Saturday versus a Monday or Tuesday. And then you also need to know with some pretty good certainty how much they're willing to pay you for that experience.
Right.
And so if you're going to open a taco restaurant that like they're unlikely to pay you more than $20 a head for that experience, maybe 25, but like if it's a sit down restaurant, maybe you'll get up closer to 30, but like you pretty much know based on the competition and based on what other people are doing, like how much people are going to be willing to give you for that meal. And so that number should be very clear in your head of what that average check is. And so for Omakase Sushi Restaurant, we kind of had budgeted this $285 a head based on what we were doing with the pop-up. Now, amazingly, it ended up being way more than that because people ended up spending more once they were in the environment and the wine and everything else like that. But in our other concepts, it's like when you're building out like a pizza restaurant, you should know that people aren't going to be willing to give you more than, $35 to $40 a head for a pizza restaurant. So how many of those covers are you going to need to do to hit that top line sales that's going to make this business worth it? How much is the rent? How much square footage? And like in a certain amount of space, there's only so many covers that you're going to be able to do on your busiest night. Doesn't matter if you're booked out 3 months in advance. It doesn't matter if you've got a line out the door. You've got like pretty much a limited amount of seats and a limited number of people that can go through that, times the amount that they're likely to give you is going to give you a really good understanding of that top line number. And if you don't have really good certainty on that top line number that it's going to lead to a successful business, that's what most likely leads to failure in my experience. And that's where also I've made mistakes.
So in the what you do with the Mujo, basically like you have something edamame style. Am I saying that
sushi,
edamame style. Like that's something that's a unique selling proposition that nobody else is doing in Atlanta. There's big pockets, deep pockets.
Well, there are now. There's a number of people doing it now.
And that was the point that I was going to get to. But when you're first to market, they call that the blue ocean effect, right? I experienced that with Restaurant Unstoppable podcast when I started this 12 years ago, right? Like there was no restaurant business podcast. That's why I started it, because I was looking for it. And I was like, well, somebody just freaking ask these questions so I can learn. So I decided to ask the questions to get the answers I was after. But now, like, I've lost track. I used to be able to track, there's a new one. Now it's just like, I can't keep track anymore. So be ready. Like what works today might not work for 10 years. And I think that's a big reason why you see a Linea Group in their concept next, because they literally have to reinvent to like hit the trend or the new thing to stay relevant. I think it's every quarter or every year they do something, or like
it's extremely challenging. But I do think that there is this, not all businesses are the same, but specifically with restaurants, I think there is a tremendous advantage to being first to market with a concept in a neighborhood. And however you define that neighborhood, like Mujo, the neighborhood is Atlanta, because it's such a unique high-end experience. And so being first to Atlanta with a concept like that is important. But like, for Iberian Pig, being first to a neighborhood with Spanish tapas, or being the first steakhouse in a neighborhood, or being the first, good quality Mexican restaurant in a neighborhood. So when you're the first to market in a neighborhood with a great version of that concept, you can own that space for like 20 years.
Yeah. The first is 0-0 sourdough starter pizza concept. Like that's where you see like these things starting to fragment even further to find new blue water.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Well, and the blue ocean theory is one that I love, about kind of unlocking this demand that doesn't exist in a market. But it doesn't. The blue ocean strategy is kind of like you want to spread, swim in blue waters, and the red oceans are where people are bloody and eating each other alive. And there is some corollary there, but like in that specific theory and book, it's about unlocking this demand that didn't already exist. And I think in our industry, we're not like unlocking new demand with new restaurant concepts. Now, there's already that existing demand for entertaining and eating out. And so you're trying, no matter what you're doing, you're already in a little bit of a red ocean, but you're creating some space in that ocean that is new, that people are getting excited about. And I do think that if your concept is really well thought out and well executed, and you're the first to a neighborhood with that concept, then you can be very successful for a long time. But there's like a little caveat there, which is it's also in the Peter Thiel book End to One, which is really great, about how these businesses become monopolies and people like Google and Facebook and things like that. You being like one of one doesn't mean you're the first like Turkish, Japanese, African restaurant in a neighborhood. That's not unlocking that blue ocean. So I think that you can kind of get carried away with that theory where you're like, I'm the first to market with this, Turkish, Japanese, African restaurant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that obviously doesn't exist. So I think that there's that element of how do you create like a hit, and a hit, whether it's a hit dish or a hit song or a hit movie or a hit restaurant, like there's some element of familiarity. There's some element that people understand, but it's done in a novel way. And in restaurants specifically, you're first in a neighborhood with that concept.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's this idea, first, like, is it Seth Godin in Purple Cow, or I think he talks about this, or maybe it's The Dip, or he shares a stat that like the difference between being number one and number two in a segment is like 100%. So if you're doing like $1 million in like revenue, then number two is probably doing like 500,000. Like you're going to double the amount of business, and the difference between number one and number two. So like being the first market, inventing like pouring your own ocean means you're instantly number one. So you're going to be the best, and anybody comes behind you. And then I think it's a matter of getting that loyalty and developing the brand, right?
That's right.
So what was the book that you mentioned, the End to One, or that references like the Googles and how they grow? And
that was Peter Thiel's book.
Peter Thiel's book. So I read another book that was called Power and Progress. And in that book, they talk about whoever controls the technology, controls the narrative, controls the resources. And that book really kind of shook me because when you live in a national and global marketplace, that law still applies. Human nature is still human nature. And number one becomes fucking huge, dude. Like being Google, being Meta, and being number one and having billions of customers that use you every day. Like how many people do you know their business is literally built on Google? It's scary.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't think we realize how much power we're giving these entities. I don't think they want us to know how much power they have.
Oh, it's tremendous.
It's scary.
Yeah.
And most people are just completely ignorant to it. And then I was thinking to myself, okay, this idea of power and progress, whoever controls the technology, historically, whoever, like it started with like mills, like whoever had the ability to mill the most flour controlled everything. And that was the kings and the churches basically. And if you wanted to create your own mill, they would come at you and they would just knock it down. Like you are not competing with us. Like you cannot have our technology. And that still progresses to this day. So I think about the future and I'm like, how does that like apply in the restaurant industry? And you see some of these companies, like when I say that, like technology in the restaurant industry, big companies that have a lot of technology, like what comes to your mind?
Right now?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that right now the whole paradigm is shifting towards AI, and it's going to completely shake up the pre-existing order of things.
In a good way or a bad way?
Who knows? I don't think that we know yet. I think that the technology is going to get so much more powerful, and I think for quite some time there will be this amazing unlocking of new activities and creativity that's going to allow for every business to get much more efficient and better and faster.
100%.
And it's going to be an amazing time to be alive. I'm in the optimistic, court here. I think for at least for 50 years. I think who knows what's going to happen after that, the robot apocalypse or whatever that people are talking about. But I think that right now the pace of technology and the growth is unlike any time in the history of humans. And it's going to be really fun to be a part of.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
And I think it's going to be fun to watch. But I think as it relates to restaurants, people in a time when technology is advancing as fast as it is, and it's going to be changing the nature of work for everybody, people are going to be looking to places like restaurants where they can sit down and break bread and have those relationships and have those in-person, kind of meetings and, have a glass of wine and let loose. And those experiences are not going away. And so, people like us that are designing those experiences, I think we need to lean further into that in-person element.
Yeah.
And I think it's not going anywhere. I think the history of restaurants is really interesting to me. So did you know that like restaurants as they exist today, where, you kind of have a server and somebody takes your order and then it comes out in a nice environment, those are in the United States, not very long. So like 1860s, 1850s, 1860s, the first restaurants in the United States only in New York City.
Yeah.
Okay. Before that, it was essentially a version of Chipotle, outdoor Chipotle, where people would go up and they'd get a scoop of slop, and that was basically a meal. Is like these outdoor markets, and so. As we know of restaurants today, it's really not an old institution. So you think about how much development and advancement there has been in technology in the last 150 years. Our entire industry has been created, and the new concepts and things that are coming out constantly are constantly pushing the envelope of creativity and what dining out is, and introducing technology and different things into the way in which we dine out. And so I truly believe that like our industry is poised to be extremely successful for a long period of time, despite a lot of the technological disruptions that are happening in other industries. And so I think just focusing on that in-person experience and the guest experience, and I think the pandemic was actually an amazing thing in that it really showed everybody how much we love restaurants, how much we need restaurants. And so I think that's only going to continue. And so for people that can touch, like really dive into that emotional connection that we create when we're in a restaurant with the business and with the people that we're with, like the more we can build around that, I think the better a restaurant will be.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm actually really hopeful for AI. I worry about other industries, the blue collar, white collar industries, where anything data driven, anything process driven, is going to go away. Creativity has a little bit of a foothold, although AI is getting pretty good at that right now too. But really the thing at the end of the day, leadership and human connectivity, you're probably familiar with Moore's law, which is like the technology expands exponentially. Yep. And with AI, that is that curve.
Even more so.
Yeah. But I think people forget that at the end of the day, no matter how fast technology evolves, humans don't evolve exponentially the same way at the same rate. So we are, in a sense, like we are a governor, like we are the firewall. I don't think we will be able to keep up at the rate at which not collectively, there'll be specialists that can focus on one thing at a time, and we'll be able to like fragment. I think to your point, I think that the industry will continue to evolve. It will continue to fragment, but what is currently here, i.e., full service models aren't going anywhere. I just think that they might take up a smaller market share, as people continue to get their food delivered and made for them and all this stuff. I think you'll see more of that, less cooking from home, but there will definitely be full service, fine dining, casual dining, because at the end of the day, we don't go out to eat for food. We go out to eat for experiences and connectivity, and we want to be. It's a human nature. We need to be with our people. We need community. We need to bump up against each other. Like we're not going to evolve out.
There's
of
a
that.
reason that busy restaurants are where people want to go. They go in and they see a lot of people there. They want to be there.
Yeah.
They don't want to walk into an empty restaurant and be in an empty restaurant. Like that's part of the reason people go out.
Right. I think for a long time,
other humans.
You saw restaurants would just kind of rinse and repeat. They would go work for somebody. They would take those systems and then make their own restaurant. You just kind of saw like this like cookie cutter restaurant model, and the majority of restaurants were casual dining, full service restaurants, and fine dining. And then it just started to like fragment. Like new blue water. Everyone started looking for their blue water, and I think that will continue. But you'll see probably it will level off somewhere, somehow. What else did I want to say? You mentioned something. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been a lot of fun. I think back to the other thing, I think that right now there are technology companies in the restaurant industry. I won't say which ones are which, but there are clear leaders in different segments of the industry right now. And I think it's really important that restaurant owners stay cognitive and conscious of letting these companies get too big, because if they do get too big, we don't win, they win. And you can choose you can choose where you want to put your money. And I think AI will help level the playing field on these technology companies. So treat technology companies like you would treat where you get your strawberries in August, or like, June, like wherever you are in the country, like go local, and focus on service, not a slight edge in technology, because at the end of the day, I don't think a slight edge will matter as much as relationships and customer support,
Yeah, I like that.
So, is there anything we didn't discuss up to this point that you were hoping would come out of the conversation?
I don't know. I don't think so. We covered a lot of ground.
It was great, man. And I knew you, like, we had that recording remotely. We bumped into each other at the National Restaurant Association. I've been wanting to connect with you on all these passes through. We made it happen. I would love to connect with you in another 7 years.
Let's
when
do
you
it,
doubled
man.
in size.
I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that. I'm really interested to see my perspective back then and now, 7 years later.
Yeah, I mean, you made an impression on me. That's why I reached back out to you. And I would like to ask a couple questions before we wrap it up. I don't know, actually. I think I already asked you this question. The what are the 3 pieces of wisdom you'd leave behind? Do you remember what you said? I don't remember what you said.
I don't remember what I said either.
But I gotta ask you. Actually, let's bring you to the top. So, what is one thing about your business, a value, a process, a system that's truly uncommon and makes you unstoppable?
Well, I think it's the core, like, guiding ethos of the company, which is our mission: passionately pursuing the perfect dining experience, one guest at a time. And it's about that, breaking things down into like that micro segment, like one customer, one relationship, like one employee, like taking it down to the smallest possible unit. And I think focusing on that, and then you can build something great from there. But if you're not doing things well on that smallest possible unit, then it's never going to work.
I just recorded something with David McClaskey. We covered the 4 pillars of excellence. In that presentation, he talked about the best restaurants are in pursuit of perfection. They never achieve it because it's impossible, but it's in the pursuit of that you achieve excellence. And I think that's a powerful mindset. The mission statement is to change the world through inspiring, empowering, and transforming the restaurant industry. So how have you personally transformed? How are you a better man today than you were back when you got started in the early 2000s?
Well, I think that your journey of success and failure, the failures are what are the most educational. And I think that when you the restaurant business is amazing at keeping you humble, and I think that anytime where I've gotten ahead of myself and I felt like, I'm crushing it and this
ego
is awesome,
swelling.
and your ego swells, and then you get humbled. And I think that I love that about our business. It's what's challenging. And I think that it has also, made me a better leader, and a better parent and a better spouse. And, having that, that nature where you're constantly questioning if, like, you're doing the best possible thing at that moment. You don't know. You know what I mean? And I think people who think that they know that they're doing the best thing, it's that's not a positive place to be. And I don't think other people want to be around you if you're like that.
I don't know if you can never know if you're doing the best thing, but I think it's easier to know if you're doing the right thing. Like, does it resonate with you? Does it feel good? Do you feel like you found your definite purpose? Do you like get excited when you wake up in the morning? If you can find
confidence in doing the right thing is important, but it can lead to hubris and narcissism, if you're not questioning it.
For sure. More questions are coming into my head as we're going along. I did want to ask you, a lot of people who get like Michelin stars, it's like a blessing and a curse. It's like that double-edged sword of like, you get it, and then it's like, now we got to keep it. Do you feel that?
I think we felt a lot of pressure with the inaugural guide, with the very first guide, because we were a very expensive fine dining restaurant. And so the expectation is that we would have a Michelin star and we would be in that guide, especially if they're giving them out in Atlanta. We wanted to be part of that inaugural guide. So there was definitely pressure to get it initially because of the style of restaurant that we are and the experience and the price point. But then once we got that, it's only really been positive. And so I can't say that there is this negative connotation to whether or not we're going to keep it each and every year. Also because of the style of experience and the way that it is, like, it's an extremely consistent service and experience that we offer there because of the number of seats and because of the staff and everything else. And so we don't have the same like necessarily fear about losing it per se. It's just about how do we push ourselves to be even better? How do we push ourselves for 2? Like that's really where the pressure comes in, is like, how do we get better from here? Not fear of losing, but more of like that, desire to get better and gain.
Got it. I totally forgot to ask. This is a standard question I'm trying to get out. Where are you with your tech stack? Like, can you just run through your tech stack real quick? And maybe like, I'm looking for things I haven't heard before, for like a new opportunity to explore. Is there anything that you've recently adopted? I mean, just go through the tech stack and tell me like some of the more recent adoptions that you've been really happy about.
For sure. From a tech perspective, we have oftentimes been like early adopters because I've always believed that like, yeah, exactly. If technology can be a force for making the lives of our managers better and the guest experience better, and also can, improve profitability in businesses. And so there's been obviously a tremendous growth in restaurant technology in the last 10 years. It basically went from like almost no technology to now there's like a solution for everything.
Right.
And so I think that recently, I like Sunday payments, the pay at the table, is something that we've started implementing, and I like that how it works and how it kind of helps with search engine optimization and our Google reviews and things like that. So
how does it work differently than other? Because there's not the first; it's a QR code for ordering, right?
But it's the most seamless version of that.
What makes it better?
Is that you basically are able to Apple Pay the bill within one click of hitting the QR code.
And it's tied to the SEO too?
And then it also gives you an opportunity to leave a review and then post that review to Google. And so for us, it allows us that relationship management piece of it, where we're trying to assess like how well we're doing with the guest experience. The more feedback we can get, the more reviews we can get, the better. And so we kind of look at that as an aggregate measure of how well we're performing in the business on the guest experience.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the most important metric, is like, where do we stack as far as the guest, as they feel about our business, which is ultimately the guest score.
Yeah. So customer feedback and a way to pay the bill seamlessly. Mm-hmm. So it kind of sounds like a combination of like Ovation. Are you familiar with Ovation?
Yes.
And like your like standard Toast QR.
Exactly. Pay at the table.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That customer feedback is huge.
Yeah. So I think the more that we get of that, the better.
I'm hoping to talk to Victor while I'm in town. Do you know Victor?
Yeah, I do. He's a friend of mine.
Yeah. I'm hoping to make that happen.
Yeah,
put in a good word for me.
Yeah, I will.
So anything else before I cut you short in terms of technology that you're excited about?
I think we went to this very fragmented world where people were building all these little tiny technologies to do little pieces of the business, and now we're headed to more an aggregation where there's like Toast and some of these others that are trying to do basically every piece of the entire experience.
Enterprise solution is what I call it.
Yeah. One area that we're testing out is gratuity solutions. There's a couple other competitors in that space about
what
just
is gratuity
automating the way in which you really pay. The way in which you notate how tips are shared within a business can be very complicated with, back servers and food runners and captains and support assistants and things like that. So there's all the ways in which we share tips in the building and how you notate that on a daily basis and how you pay those people through payroll. That's a very complicated process. So we're looking to improve that process, and we're testing out Gratuity Solutions as a company that we're using for that. So that's one area that we're trying to improve a process.
Got it. Thank you. Those are, Sunday is a company that I've heard about a few times. I'm hoping we can connect. Gratuity Solutions, first time here listening to that. Are you still using Gather?
We are, but now it's called Triple C. They sold.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. I would love to get them on the show too, because they get mentioned a lot. And the only other question I wanted to ask before I say goodbye, in terms of technology, are you looking at enterprise solutions, or are you using an enterprise solution? Like, there's only two I know of right now.
Which are?
Restaurant 365 that has a general ledger built in, and Restaurant Systems Pro, which is probably their biggest competition, but they're not even aware of it yet.
Yeah, so we've been using Restaurant 365. We were one of the earliest adopters of Restaurant 365 because I felt like the other solutions compete at the time, and a couple others.
Which is now Restaurant 365.
Yeah, exactly.
You're using Avero.
Cloud-based.
Yeah.
We still use Avero, although the They have not really evolved the product very much, and I think that's going to be a challenge for them. Just like as an analytics platform, I think too many people are doing the analytics, so they have to, I think, evolve a little bit more to stay competitive. But yeah, Restaurant 365 has gotten better over time. It definitely, there was some real growing pains in the early days. They were really the first cloud-based solution for accounting systems.
Yeah.
And so there really wasn't an option unless you went with some of the clunkier kind of old systems.
Yeah. I mean, definitely the most recommended on the show. I like they're honestly one of the companies I'm a little worried about getting too big, if I'm being completely honest, because they have a large market share, which is one of the reasons why I love promoting Restaurant Systems Pro so much, because I like to level out the playing field. And I've just been so impressed by Fred Langley and the people over at Restaurant Systems Pro. They just acquired a POS. So now they're the only fully integrated POS to general ledger and everything in between.
Oh, that's
which
cool.
Yeah. So, and nobody's talking about it. You know why?
Yeah.
Because they don't have the budget to tell the world.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's what it comes down to, power and progress. And that's why I'm championing them so much and trying to get the word out there. Go check it out. And now is when I say, man, thank you so much for taking the time. I'll skip the whole 3 things, but I made you answer that question one other time. I won't make you do it again. But I would love to know who in Atlanta or across the country, as I'm traveling, who do you think I should talk to? Who do you respect and admire?
Oh, wow. There's a lot. I think about Nashville, Max and Ben Goldberg.
I'm talking to Max.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I'm stoked. Yeah.
He's one of my close buddies. He's an amazing guy, and his brother as well have a great company, Strategic Hospitality. I admire everything that they've done. There's another guy out in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Elliot Nelson, who
dude, you're making me so happy.
Yeah.
He's the next one after.
Elliot is an incredible guy and has amazing restaurants all over the Midwest. You got to talk to Levi Good Company in Texas. He's in Houston, also San Antonio. Has some tremendous restaurants. He's a really awesome guy. I also the Lanny brothers, Joe Lanny out in Cincinnati. He's an incredible restaurateur, and they've got, I think, 60 restaurants now.
Say that one more time. The Lanny?
Lanny, Lanni, Thunderdome Restaurant Group in Cincinnati. Joe and his brother, they're amazing. And then if you ever get to Canada, Canadian restaurateur friend of mine, PJ LaRue, owns Craft and a bunch of other different concepts. He has an incredible story. Awesome. He's an amazing guy. And then if you ever make it to Boise, Idaho, Scott Slater is doing some cool stuff there. And
dude, keep going, man. I'll pull out stuff. Scott Slater. This is my North Star. This is really what I like. The more leads I get, I think success recognizes success. Good people recognize good people. Word of mouth should still be king in my mind, not. That's one of the things I push back with marketing, is that it's so easy to manipulate the narrative if you have the budget to do so. So I'm really trying to push against that. So that was Scott. One more time.
Slater, look out. All right. And now how do we connect? If we're interested in continuing the conversation, maybe we want to come work for you. Is there a way to connect? Yeah. At CHG Restaurants is our handle on social. CHGrestaurants.com is our website with all of our kind of links for all the concepts and work and everything else.
Nice. And super stoked you called out Max, and I'm reconnecting with Nelson Elliott and literally the next week. So that just makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing, man. So thanks for that reinforcement. This is where I say thank you so much for getting open, getting vulnerable, letting us get inspired by you. I literally cannot do what I do without people like you being willing to get open and vulnerable. And there is no questioning, my friend, you are unstoppable. Cheers.
Cool.